The environment has been changed.
What we are saying is half a half.
We've got to be able to regenerate our
There'll
economy.
be people who are kind, people who are cruel, but that's life. You can be bigoted about bigots. I'm fine with that. What's wrong with Singaporeans?
Let's start up first. The Little India riots actually brought the situation of the migrant workers into the spotlight. It happened in December 2013, where there were 400 rioters, of which now 53 have been deported and 20 are waiting to stand trial. But that's not the only incident. In January this year, not too long ago, there was another incident affecting about 100 migrant workers that were waiting to watch the premiere of a film in the Rec Cinema, and it wasn't, they were not able to screen it, and there was a minor protest for that as well. Going back further, on the 6th of February 2012, 200 Bangladeshi staged a sit-out because they had not been paid their salaries and they were given dismal food. And in November 2012, on 171 Chinese drivers of SMRT went on strike. Of them, 29 were deported and 4 had to serve short jail sentences. Is this just a normal occurrence of events that you would find whenever you have foreign workers? These are just labor problems that you would encounter? Or is this symptomatic of the conditions in Singapore? Perhaps I'd like to put this first to Professor Alan Chong, because he studied similar situations in other countries. So how unusual is this, Professor Chong?
Okay, perhaps I should start with painting a bit of the historical perspective here. You see, after Singapore was founded by the British and so on, we've had this recurring issue of integrating foreign workers. You know, if you look at the history of Singapore under the British, it was largely that. We brought in, or rather the British at the time brought in, these migrant populations as workers. The Chinese were not indigenous to this island. They were encouraged here by the British. And also there were various, ethnic groups from South Asia. So I begin to see this recurring pattern in Singapore's history. Lots of people want to come here or have been encouraged here by various forces, policies and so on. And the question is, how do you integrate them? For a good part of Singapore's so-called post-independence history, the government has solved a lot of these issues of integration by and large. But you see, globalization did not take off in a major way in terms of human flows into Singapore to build our mega infrastructure projects until, I think, the last 10 years. That's why we have this situation where Singaporeans are, linking overcrowding issues to a burgeoning foreign worker population.
Sorry, can I just ask you, you said in the last 10 years, but we have actually been importing immigrant workers.
We've had this flow of foreign workers for a long time. It's just that the scale of it, I think, burgeoned in the last 10 years or so. That's why Singaporeans are feeling it, and you see how they voted in, national elections, by-elections, and so on. I mean, you get these currents from the ground as well as on the various democratic websites and independent websites run by Singaporeans and so on. And having said that also, if you look at any other developed country that is heavily reliant on these foreign workers, you get these issues. In Britain, for instance, right now, you have this issue of the Polish plumbers. Well, not just Polish plumbers, but Poles who work in the UK, because Britain as part of the EU has this border-free or border control-free system whereby any European from any part of the EU can cross the borders easily.
So are the incidents that we are experiencing in Singapore very little, very small? Are they more than normal? How would you compare the incidents in Singapore to other parts of the world?
I would say that they are more or less about the same, because there have been incidents in the Emirates, in Qatar and so on, which are not widely reported, but they've nonetheless occurred.
So you're saying there's nothing new in the locals complaining about foreign immigration, but what about the extent to which the foreign workers are causing to the locals, the hardship they're causing, and vice versa. Surely the countries are not treating the foreign workers the same in all the countries. I want to examine how well does Singapore treat its foreign workers, and maybe we can move to Debbie. You've dealt with them a lot. Are we generally better than other countries in handling our workers?
I think that the 4 incidents that you raised, they can be separated into 2 different groups. One is the bus drivers strike, and the sit-down strike from the Bangladeshi workers. I think those 2 definitely are work-related, whereas the others, the Rex Theatre and the riots in Little India, those were sparked by something very different, and may or may not be work-related. But the first 2 definitely are work-related, and those are the issues that I'm more interested in, that I deal with more often. So I think that the others, I think that to a certain extent I would agree with Lee Hsien Loong when he says that this was sparked by something very different, which is not to say that there aren't underlying issues, but those underlying issues of how migrant workers are treated was not what sparked off the riots in December.
No, but could the way they've been treated created frustration in them and lowered their level of tolerance and increased their frustration, so that they responded negatively in such situations?
I think it doesn't have to do with the way they were treated at work, but I think that has very specifically to do with the way they are treated by the bus drivers and the people who organize the men to get on the bus. The buses bring in, I think, a few tens of thousands of workers, or did, every Sunday to Little India. And when the buses pick them up, they stop at a few certain points where the men will be lining up. Now there's quite a crowd of men, and they're all lining up to get on the buses, and so there might be crowding, and in this case there was one man who was one man too many to get on that bus. He was told to get off the bus, and he had had too much to drink. So when he was told to get off, I think the bus driver was angry, and the timekeeper was angry at him and told him to get off. I think that raised a certain amount of, there was a certain amount of anger raised, much more so, of course, after he was hit by the bus, hit and injured by the bus. Then I think they were extremely angry at the bus driver and at this particular woman, and the fact that the first responders came to view the situation but realized that these 2, the Chinese bus driver and the Chinese bus timekeeper, were in danger from the crowd. They sought to protect those 2 people.
But can I ask you, but how does it escalate to getting 400 people
I'm not
rioting?
Sure, but they certainly didn't come because of any dissatisfaction about salaries or accommodations or anything. There was something that caused these people to run from other places to that particular spot, and they were angry at what they saw. So I think that we really should separate this. Now, their anger may have been towards the bus driver, the situation of the buses, and perhaps to the first responders. They do have a relationship and maybe an unhappy relationship with the police on Sundays. When the when the men are gathered on Sundays in that area in Little India, they're enjoying themselves. They're usually sitting in the open space, both the Bangladeshis and the Indians in separate areas, sitting in an open space, gathered together with their friends. The police and the auxiliary police are very much in evidence, often checking papers, checking everyone's papers. Can I see your work permit? Can I see your work permit?
In the normal course of their duty, or do you consider that intimidation?
Well, I would say it's their duty. They're doing their duty, but they don't do that to any other group of people.
But there are no other group of people in large numbers in Little India.
Well, maybe there are groups of people in other areas where Singaporeans congregate. They don't ask to see your IC, your IC, your IC. They will check the work permits on a regular basis, no matter what they're doing, and it may be seen by the men as a kind of low-level harassment. And then they issue fines. When the men are sitting around with their food and their drink cans.
Issue fines means that they do find people who are overstaying.
No, they issue fines for a beer can or for a Coke can that's left in front of a group of people who've been sitting and enjoying themselves for a few hours, and the wrappers and the food wrappers and things are left in front of them while they're still there. They will issue fines for littering.
Okay.
while it's still directly in front of the man and he hasn't yet left the place.
Okay.
So this is quite an
Unfriendly.
irritant
Mm.
because it might be a fine for $300.
That much.
I've seen it and I've also heard from many workers. I have
Okay.
seen this occur.
So you're saying that there's a festering disaffection for the bullying ways.
Disaffection is a very polite way of saying it, yeah.
Okay.
Would
I
be a
don't
better
want to
person to-
culturally profile them,
Yeah.
but
But
it also
I-
seems that they are more politically aware and more politically willing to express their opposition to things.
Sorry to cut in, but I'm getting seriously worried about. You say you're not racially profiling, but you are.
I am.
Riots are not specific to South Asia. I mean, we had riots up to 1969 here. You see riots in China, you see riots in Europe. But yes, Debbie is right. When disaffection is a very polite way of putting it. Some of it can be heavy-handed. The problem goes back to the regulation of these companies. They are regulated under two acts, the Police Act and the Firearms and Explosives Act. The training, there's no statutory requirement for the amount or type of training these auxiliary officers get. So it all depends on their own, their own prejudices, their own professional way of dealing with people. Some are better than others, some are worse than others.
I think, the police also may have to stray into this politically insensitive territory of profiling people in a certain way. But I do take Denise's point about the heavy-handedness of some of this policing. All these things, as you rightly point out, could be triggers. If people are high on alcohol and they've already got this list of grievances, a little spark could set something.
I don't think that we should bring alcohol into this particular case. The man who was drunk was behaving, rather badly. But I don't think that has to be an issue. The fact that people drink, as many of us are doing right now,
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
and not apologizing for it at all.
Absolutely.
Now, the fact that consumption of beer is common doesn't mean that they were drunk.